Hello everyone, and welcome to Scary Tales. I know many of you love listening to these eerie stories to unwind or fall asleep. But before you drift off, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. If you're enjoying these chilling tales, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps keep the scares coming. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into tonight's terrifying story. Story number 1. I work as a wildlife researcher, which means I spend weeks, sometimes months, in remote places, studying animal behavior and tracking environmental changes. I've spent nights in deserts, forests, and even frozen tundras, but one of my longest assignments was in a remote mountain range, miles from any town. The organization I worked for had a small wooden research cabin deep in the woods. It wasn't anything fancy, just one big room with a bed, a desk, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. There was no cell service, no Wi-Fi, and the only way to contact the outside world was a radio transmitter. I had been stationed there for almost 3 weeks, documenting local wildlife patterns. The forest was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where you could hear the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hoot of an owl at night. But on the 22nd night, I started hearing something else. I was inside the cabin, sitting at my desk, typing up notes from the day when I heard it. A soft, scraping sound. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a coyote. But the longer I listened, the more unnatural it sounded. It wasn't the quick scurrying of paws or claws on wood. It was a slow, deliberate, dragging sound, like something was scraping against the floorboards beneath me. I froze, my hands hovering over my laptop. The cabin was built on wooden stilts, which meant there was a crawl space underneath it. The thought made my stomach tighten. I turned off my lamp and listened. For a few seconds, everything was silent, just the wind outside. Then, there it was again, a slow, dragging sound right beneath me. I grabbed my flashlight, took a deep breath, and crept towards the door. I knew I needed to check, but every instinct was telling me to stay inside. I stepped out onto the small porch, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The night was pitch black, the trees swaying gently in the wind. I took a few steps down the wooden stairs, shining my light under the cabin. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dry leaves and dirt. Nothing. I exhaled, shaking my head. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just the wind. But then I saw it. A hand. A pale, dirty hand, sticking out from the shadows beneath the cabin. It was so still that, for a second, I thought it was a doll's hand or some piece of trash that had blown under there. But then, it moved. My breath caught in my throat. My flashlight shook as the fingers twitched, curled, then slowly slid out of view. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted back inside, slamming the door and locking it. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I grabbed my hunting knife from my pack and pressed my back against the door, listening. Silence. For nearly an hour, I stayed there, knife in hand, every muscle in my body tense. I debated using the radio to call for help, but the nearest ranger station was miles away. Even if someone responded, it would take hours for them to get here. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. A slow, dragging sound, but this time it wasn't coming from beneath the cabin. It was coming from the porch. I swallowed hard, gripping my knife tighter. Then, a single knock. Just one. Soft, hollow, careful. Whoever was out there knew I was inside. I held my breath, praying they would go away. The knock came again, then again. I knew I couldn't stay there all night. I had to do something. So, I made a decision. I reached for my rifle, one of the few things I had for protection in the wilderness. If this was some desperate traveler looking for shelter, I would warn them off. If it was something worse, I needed to be ready. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and flung it open. Nothing. The porch was empty. The forest beyond was silent. Even the wind had stopped. I stepped forward cautiously, my rifle raised. Then I felt it. A shift in the air. A presence. I turned my flashlight toward the edge of the porch, and there, just beneath the wooden railing, I saw an eye. A single bloodshot eye, staring up at me through the gaps in the floorboards. A voice, raspy, whispering, came from below. You shouldn't have opened the door. I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut and bolting it. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the rifle. For the rest of the night, I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, waiting, listening. By dawn, the noises had stopped. The forest felt normal again, but I wasn't taking any chances. As soon as the sun rose, I packed my gear, grabbed my radio, and started hiking. I didn't even look back at the cabin. It took 6 hours to reach the ranger station. When I arrived, exhausted and paranoid, I told them everything. The rangers exchanged uneasy glances. Then, one of them sighed and said, "You're not the first." A few years back, another researcher reported seeing shadows moving under the cabin. Another one swore he heard whispering at night, even when he was alone. We even found some old belongings under there, once a sleeping bag, some rusty cans, a knife. But we never found anyone. And before that, well, there are stories. Old stories the locals tell. Stories about the land. Goosebumps prickled my skin. Apparently, I wasn't the only researcher who had experienced strange things at that cabin. Over the years, multiple people had reported hearing noises, seeing figures in the woods, and feeling like they were being watched. The worst part. A few years ago, a ranger found evidence that someone had been living under the cabin. They had discovered an old sleeping bag, empty food cans, and a small rusted knife. But they never found the person. And the cabin. It's still there. But I don't think I'll ever go back. Story number 2. I drive a catering truck for work, hauling food to restaurants late at night. It's a lonely job, and by the time I finish, I'm either too tired to sleep or too hungry to think straight. One night, after chugging 2 Red Bulls to stay awake, I stopped at my usual McDonald's around 2 a.m. The drive-thru was weirdly busy for a Tuesday. While waiting, I noticed a rusty Volkswagen parked in the darkest corner of the lot. Its windows were pitch black, and it was backed into the spot like someone didn't want to be seen. I tried to ignore it. Maybe they're just eating in their car, I thought. But it gave me the creeps. After grabbing my food, I drove to a quiet nature preserve near my house. It's an old spot where my friends and I used to hang out. The parking lot was empty when I arrived, but seconds later, headlights blinded me. The Volkswagen from McDonald's pulled in. My heart raced. Did they follow me? I called my friend Sebastian, who lived nearby. He agreed to meet me, and I felt safer when his car rolled up. We started walking up the trail to the lookout, but I glanced back and saw all 4 doors of the Volkswagen swing open. 4 guys got out and stood frozen, staring into the dark. At the top of the trail, we sat on a stone wall, eating fries and joking to calm our nerves. Then we heard voices. 3 guys walked up, acting friendly, but *2* close. One offered us a hit of his joint. We said no, but when I asked, "Weren't you at McDonald's earlier?" their leader, a guy with a nose ring and tattoos, flinched. That's when I realized. There were 4 of them. Where's the 4th guy? Sebastian pointed into the trees. The missing man stood there, holding a knife. We bolted down the trail, our feet slipping on gravel. The men chased us, yelling, but we made it to our cars and sped off. Sebastian snapped a photo of their license plate as we left. The next morning, we went to the police. They recognized the guy in Sebastian's photo. His name was Derek, a fired McDonald's worker with a restraining order from his ex-girlfriend, Emily. Derek had been stalking her for months, lurking near the restaurant to harass her. The police tracked down Emily. She told us Derek had threatened her for weeks. He'd wait in the parking lot, follow customers he thought were my friends. Or me, she said, shaking. I think he followed you because he saw you at McDonald's and thought you were connected to me. The knife-wielding 4th guy was Derek's cousin, who'd been helping him scare Emily's co-workers. The police arrested all 4 men that week. Emily transferred to a different McDonald's, and the preserve added security cameras. Sebastian and I still joke about how fast we ran that night, but I don't go to that lookout anymore. As for Derek, last I heard, he's in jail, and Emily finally feels safe. Story number 3. I've always loved walking my farm at night. The quiet helps me forget how lonely I've been since Maria, my wife, died. Our old farmhouse feels too big now, but I can't leave. Too many memories. My dog, Bosley, is my only company. One night after a long day welding, I took Bosley for our usual walk. As we neared the house, I glanced up at the bedroom window Maria and I once shared. For a split second, I saw a shadow move. My heart raced. Who's in my house? I stormed inside, checked every room. Nothing. Just dust and old furniture. Must have imagined it, I told myself. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The next night, Bosley growled at the ceiling. Creak, creak, footsteps, right above my head, in Maria's old room. I grabbed my flashlight, ran upstairs. Again, nothing. But the air felt heavy, like someone had been there. Fear crept in. The kitchen lights were on the next night. I never leave lights on. I called the police. They searched everywhere. No signs of a break-in. The officers gave me a pitying look. Maybe it's stress, one said. I knew better. The worst night came 3 days later. I couldn't sleep, so I went to Maria's room. When I opened the door, I froze. Her clothes, packed away years ago, were scattered everywhere. Then I saw her, a woman in the doorway. She wasn't Maria. Too short, too young. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She stared at me, then vanished down the stairs. I chased her outside, but she was gone. Bosley sniffed the yard, whining. The next day, I searched Maria's room again. Under her old jewelry box, I found a letter I'd never seen. My hands shook as I read it. My dearest, if you're reading this, I'm gone. There's something I never told you. Years ago, a young woman, a stranger, knocked on our door during a storm. She was sick, scared. I let her stay in the guest room, but she died in her sleep. I buried her quietly in the woods. I couldn't bear to tell you. Forgive me. Maria had signed it. My legs gave out. All these years. That night, I walked to the woods with Bosley. Near an old oak tree, I found a small weathered cross in the dirt. Suddenly, the air turned cold. The woman appeared again, her face sad, not angry. She pointed to the cross, then to the house. You just wanted me to find her? I whispered. She nodded, fading like smoke. The next morning, I called the police. They found bones under the oak tree. The stranger Maria had buried. We gave her a proper grave in the town cemetery. The ghost never returned. I still miss Maria, but the house feels lighter now. I even cleaned out her old room. Bosley still barks at shadows, but I smile and tell him it's just the wind. Thanks for listening. Good night. Have a restful sleep.